Andrea Connolly, the Youth Services Librarian at Jaffrey Public Library in Jaffrey, New Hampshire. In the hopes that our Teen Read Week program would have a big impact with our local teens, we chose a high-impact topic for our focus: comics. The 1-week, one-story program aimed to take teens through the full process of making their own comic story. The week began with a 3-hour comics workshop taught by a professional graphic novelist and ended with the promise of a published anthology thanks to a local community partner. In between, teens got the chance to collaborate on the editing process and learn digital drawing technology. It was a great experience for our teens, and the basic program could easily be adapted to suit your library's needs. With that in mind, I'll go over some of the steps to consider along the way. The first big consideration was what the anchor program should be. We knew we wanted a several-hour workshop on drawing comics, and we also knew that no one on staff was prepared to teach it. Luckily, we knew from librarian feedback that Marek Bennett is not only a whiz at drawing, he is also a great teacher. That was really important since we didn't want anyone to fall asleep when they should be having fun. In fact, many of our teens could have kept going after the 3 hours were up. Marek agreed to help us and was so enthusiastic he agreed to help us seek other avenues of funding if we couldn't win the grant. If you don't have a professional graphic novelist nearby, there are other options to consider. Get in contact with local schools and see if there is an art teacher who might work with you. Local colleges might be able to recommend an art student. You can also look online for graphic novelists who could do a video conference. Of course, if you're lucky enough to have someone with drawing skills on staff, you're all set. The next step for Miss Julie and I was to connect with our local independent bookshop and see if they would partner with us. Escape Hatch Books is right across the street, and they're always super supportive anytime we ask for their help with the summer reading prizes. We'd talked casually about partnering before, but when I went in to explain our Teen Read Week idea, they were so enthusiastic. It turns out they'd had ideas of writing workshops on the back burner for a while, and since they were just starting a new publishing venture, they were completely stoked to partner. They generously agreed to take on the publication costs themselves, and we discussed the possibility of holding a book release party for the teens anthology once it was ready. Of course, not all libraries have access to such a perfect partner, but even if you don't have a local bookstore who can fill the role of Escape Hatch Books, consider a business partner that would bring their own enthusiasm to the table. Another key partner for us was the local high school media specialist. She not only promoted our program, she made time for me to do multiple school visits with the teens during their school day. Next, it was time to sit down and research digital drawing technology. When I first envisioned the program, I thought about purchasing one drawing tablet and a copy of Photoshop. The more I researched, the more impractical this was for our needs. Photoshop is too expensive for a first dive into digital art, at least for a library that is relying completely on the Teen Read Week activity grant to fund the entirety of its program. Instead, I decided to purchase the far less expensive Clip Studio Paint Pro and download open-source raster and vector editing programs. For the drawing tablet, we chose two Huion H610 Pros, which, while they have great reviews, are on the low-cost end of the spectrum at about $80 each. The challenge with low-end graphics tablets is they do not include a built-in screen. While drawing, the artist must be looking up at the computer screen. During a tech talk with our local high school teachers, one mentioned to me that he'd returned the drawing tablet he bought after 3 days and got an iPad instead. It's true that a drawing tablet with a screen or an iPad are much simpler to pick up initially, but the cost difference is in the hundreds of dollars. For libraries that need to go very low budget, it's perfectly possible to do without the technology component altogether. However, I will say that more than any other facet of the program, it was the drawing tablets that hooked teens' interest most. After all of the basic components of the program were decided on, we sought out funding. The Teen Read Week activity grant was our first hope, and we were fortunate enough not to have to seek further. Without the grant, we'd have needed to seek community sponsors to cover the anchor program, technology, and also additions to the collection. All told, the program cost us $1,000. It is quite possible to do for less, and it would be very, very easy to spend far more. The largest single expense for us was the professional artist for the workshop. If you plan to your library's specific needs, you should have little trouble adapting it. The last major pre-program consideration is marketing. We did a lot of the usual promotions: library website, posters, newspapers, social media. Additionally, I visited the school and gained several registrations from that alone. What was really interesting to see during this process is how many older people took an interest as well. They wanted to hear about the grant, the technology, the graphic novels, and many took flyers home for the teens in their lives. Many have stopped by in the week following to ask how it went. The program was designed for teens, but it has created connections to the library for other ages as well. Before I wrap up, there are a few final things I'd like to mention. If you are planning to use drawing tablets in your program and are not already familiar with the technology, I recommend using and learning it as far out from your program as possible. It takes considerable time and patience to learn, and the more comfortable you are with it, the less trouble you'll have teaching it to the teens. Because of the hand-eye coordination involved, many of our teens opted not to use the drawing tablets during 1 week, 1 story. They said they'd prefer to get comfortable with it after there was no longer a time crunch. Since it was the tablets that drew them in, and since the technology is there to encourage them to continue creating long after the program ends, I think it was a very worthwhile investment. And lastly, many of our teens enjoyed making their own mini-comics using the library's photocopier. Any library with a copy machine has a cheap publishing tool at its fingers. Marek Bennett's website has free videos and comics on how to construct your own mini-comics, so please do check out his resources. Happy drawing!